So I'm here with Joe Murphy of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Hello, Joe. How are you doing?
Hello, nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Have you had a good day?
Yeah, I'm having a great day. They've just brought out the beers and everyone's been quite raucous now, but it's been fun.
Yeah, everyone's getting pretty jolly after a good old day of sustainability.
Yes, some people look like they are really partaking. Yeah,
Yeah.
very jolly.
Oh yeah, we'll have to go around later and enjoy ourselves as well. No, I'm enjoying myself very much right now. So let's talk about the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So I'd like to know a little bit about what you do there and your role, and also how you got into sustainability, if that's all right.
Good, yes. Okay, so the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is an international NGO. It was founded in 2010, and its mission is to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. And maybe just to do a little bit on circular economy, because that was how I got into sustainability, if you like. I originally, when I first finished university, I went to work in the private sector, so I was in professional services and finance. Really enjoyed aspects of that, but found it fundamentally a little bit sort of narrow and not necessarily taking on or addressing some of the big things that we needed to address as a society. After that, I went charity sector and worked in very sort of boots on the ground charities for a couple of years, and found that quite limiting in terms of, you can drive quite local change, but fundamentally these issues are global in nature and very systemic. So how do you really tackle them? And I was looking for something that was kind of in the middle of those two. So leveraging, the kind of entrepreneurship associated with business and investment and speed, with the actual intent to create something meaningful and lasting and value adding. And circular economy as an idea really is a bit of a reframing on some sustainability strategies to say, instead of dealing with the problems of the current economy and sort of putting plasters on it, how do we fundamentally redesign the economy? So we have a story about growth, about job creation, about innovation and entrepreneurship, but design it in a way that we address the root causes of the issues we have today, and design out waste and pollution, increase the utilization of the stuff we have, and regenerate nature.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. So I'd like to know, in your words, how what the relationship between the circular economy and net zero is.
Yeah, great question. So net zero is really optimizing for climate, so greenhouse gas reductions. And a lot of the focus around net zero has really been on the energy transition, and rightly so. We need to shift from fossil feedstocks to renewable feedstocks. Less talked about is the production and consumption side of that. So what about the energy that goes into producing all of the clothes we wear, or the things we sit on or speak into? And actually, circular economy has a massive role to play in making sure that the embodied carbon or emissions that go into producing these products is kept at its highest utility for as long as possible, and fundamentally removes the need to create more stuff, which is going to drive more consumption and drive more energy usage. So we've done some work to say that the circular economy will be required to tackle about 45% of the emissions to stay within the 1.5 degree scenario. So it's just under half of the climate solution.
Fantastic answer. That was brilliant. Very succinct. Very informative. Okay, so I'd like to know a little bit about what the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has planned for 2025, if that's all right. Do you have any top priorities?
Yes, I mean, so we, as an organization, I think we're at a moment where circular economy has had huge uptake. So 75 countries around the world now have circular economy roadmaps. 55% of businesses have circular economy in their strategy or have some related targets. And really the focus now is on implementation. So people have adopted the idea, they believe in it, they've incorporated it into strategy, and now it's about doing it. And as an organization, we're set up to support that kind of implementation. And that really means picking very specific entry points. So, for example, we do a lot of work on plastics packaging, and there are a couple of key challenges there. One is we need to scale reusable packaging solutions. So how do we scale so that 20% of plastics packaging is reusable, is covered by reuse systems? Another is we need to design out some of the problematic formats, so very complex multi-material sachets that are really often small format, very high volume. They're prone to leakage because they often are sold to shampoos in markets where there isn't sufficient recycling infrastructure. And because of the way they're made, they have no economic value. So they're not often collected because they can't really be recycled. So we need to innovate out of those formats. And then the final thing is we need to really develop infrastructure, so recycling infrastructure, and particularly with it in markets in the global south and Southeast Asia. So we're working on implementation projects with our partners, our business network, and through our sort of policy advocacy work that really addresses implementation under those areas, for example.
Fantastic. I was wondering, just off the back of that, if the foundation had done any sort of work around the Global Plastics Treaty that was being negotiated last year, unfortunately failed to come to a conclusion. Hopefully this year there will be some renegotiations. Are you doing anything around that?
Yeah, absolutely. We're doing a lot around that. I think the negotiations are ongoing. So yes, it failed to reach a conclusion on the timeline that's set out. I mean, we should acknowledge that it was a really ambitious timeline. So it would have been the fastest that a global treaty like that would have ever been negotiated. So it was always ambitious. And we're really hopeful that there are still opportunities to get conclusions out of that in the next steps. But what we did around that was we formed a business coalition. So there was a coalition of businesses who were really trying to send very clear and specific calls to negotiators and policymakers about the need for global rules to set a common playing field that all businesses could then compete and play on, and that would fundamentally enable us to innovate and solve the plastics packaging crisis. So we have that coalition. It still exists. We're still convening, and we're anticipating that voice will continue in parallel with the negotiations.
Well, that's great news. Okay, so and you spoke a little bit today about ESG strategies, I think, I was wondering, we've been hearing a little bit of news recently about ESG maybe being under threat from sort of various either critics or companies or investors who are thinking maybe it's not as such a strong and valuable proposition as it used to be. Do you think ESG is still going strong today?
So I think ESG, in terms of driving a sort of reporting and disclosure strategy to say we get companies to make really big targets and then report and disclose progress against those targets, and that will drive capital markets. I think that is coming under pressure because fundamentally, even when companies are making really ambitious targets, the ability for them to meet those targets is often contingent on actions beyond their control. And so I think there is that strategy alone will not deliver the level of scale of change that we need. Of course, target setting, voluntary commitments and disclosure is essential to bring transparency and to be able to measure progress. But we really, if we're honest, we also need to be looking at much more ambitious industrial policy that creates the economic conditions for new business models, new feedstocks to come online, new infrastructure to be developed. So maybe in that sort of criticism of ESG, I think what it's really pointing to is the need for more market reform, more ambitious market transformation that actually makes these solutions more economically viable. And I could give an example about that if you'd like.
That would be great.
So, I mean, just, in China, for example, the adoption of EVs has been remarkable. And I think we're essentially at a tipping point in that market. And that has been driven by a long-term industrial strategy that has aligned policy with investment, with innovation. And so the adoption of EVs in China has been remarkable. When you look at the European market, we're not seeing that same level. Actually, we have had great adoption, but we're also seeing headwinds. So many automotive manufacturers are saying, look, we can't reach the targets that we've been set because the demand isn't there. One of the reasons the demand isn't there is because the charging infrastructure isn't there. It's not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons. So the automotive companies are saying, look, without this investment in that infrastructure, it impacts the demand and it impacts our ability to meet the targets that we're trying to hit. And it's just an example of where you do have the long-term strategic industrial policy in place that aligns with business innovation, and actually where it's a bit more fragmented and it's not always there. And so I think that's just an example of really the level of long-term strategic thinking and investment we need to make a dent on these issues.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So if it's all right with you, we'll ask one final question. So I ask everyone this at the end of the interviews. If you had to give one piece of sustainability advice, what would it be?
I guess it really depends on the context, because it's a journey, and people working in organizations who are at very different stages. I think the one piece of advice I would have is that if you feel like you're running uphill by trying to get people to come to you, by talking in terms and language and frameworks that work for you in your sort of sustainability domain, that feels like a really hard challenge. So how can you increasingly meet the business where it is? So talk in terms around incentives and opportunities and risk management that actually meets stakeholders where they are and talks to their context. And it seems a bit sort of crude to say that, but I do think in the companies where circular economy, for example, is seen as a long-term strategic investment and competitive advantage opportunity, then the conversations are much more commercial. They are happening across the business. And in organizations where it's seen as something we just need to keep an eye on, maybe we need to do some reporting around, it's really tricky to get into that commercial strategy space. So understanding your context and then finding the right words for your stakeholders feels essential.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much.